Hello and welcome to I Want to Fight Araki, a JoJo's Bizarre Adventure close analysis podcast. I'm Thomas,
And I'm M of Lee.
and today we are breaking down Stardust Crusaders episodes 21 and 22. This
These
is
are good
probably
episodes.
These are some excellent episodes, and will probably be a beefer of an episode because I know you got a lot of notes. So
I
with all that
have
said,
I have an
let's get
amount of
started.
notes.
Sorry?
I have an amount of notes. It's
You
not
have?
the most I've ever had, but they're dense, I
Yeah.
would say.
No, we had a lot to talk about, so let's just jump right into the summary. The Crusaders land on the island from the end of the Death 13 episode and quickly notice that they are not alone as they hear some rustling from the grass and a figure appears out of it. The figure begins running and the group notices from the back he looks exactly like Avdol. They catch up to the stranger, but when the group asks for answers, the man tells them to leave. Joseph explains that the man is Avdol's father who has chosen to live in isolation. Joseph says that he didn't tell the group about Avdol's father, as if any enemy stand users found out, it would threaten the man's way of life, but they need his help now, and so Joseph elects to speak with Avdol's father, not just about getting his help, but also to inform him of his son's death. This causes Polnareff to relive the fight against Whole Horse, and Joseph tries to comfort him, but Polnareff still feels responsible. As Polnareff reflects alone on the beach, he notices a mysterious lamp covered in barnacles and cleans it off. A small explosion occurs, and a genie, introducing himself as Cameo, appears, clad in white armor and a bulky frame. Cameo says that he can grant Polnareff 3 wishes. Polnareff attacks the genie with Silver Chariot, believing it to be a stand, but it is unfazed. Polnareff is disbelieving that this genie can grant wishes, and says that if he is a genie, he can make him a rich man. The genie says aloud the phrase, "Hail to you," and disappears. Polnareff believes it to have done nothing and tosses the lamp behind him. When he does so, there is a clink sound, and by clearing some grass, Polnareff discovers the lamp on top of a massive pit of golden treasure. Convinced of Cameo's abilities, he considers asking to become a famous comic book artist or getting a loving girlfriend before ultimately settling on the resurrection of both his sister and Avdol. Shortly after he makes the wish, he hears rustling in the grass and discovers a humanoid-shaped hole in the ground and hears his sister Sherry's voice. She runs away from Polnareff, keeping her face hidden as Polnareff chases after her, rousing some birds as he does so. He eventually catches up to her, but notices the birds from earlier have been torn apart. Sherry says that she doesn't want Polnareff to see her because she is dirty, but Polnareff says that he'll love her no matter what. Finally, Sherry turns to reveal herself to Polnareff, but her eye is blood red and she bites a chunk of flesh out of Polnareff's leg and neck. He is able to send her away with Silver Chariot and, in a fit of rage and sadness, summons Cameo to send Sherry back. Cameo refuses as Polnareff has already made a 3rd wish and reveals that the genie form is actually the stand, Judgment, and reveals that Judgment's ability allows Cameo to look into a person's heart and when they make a wish and make a twisted copy of their desires out of dirt, as Polnareff is continuously attacked. Cameo reminds Polnareff of his 3rd wish to bring back Avdol. The Avdol clone appears and attacks Polnareff by scratching him across the chest, but when he does so, his index and ring finger fall apart. Polnareff is attacked once again and attempts to defend himself using Silver Chariot, but Silver Chariot is restrained by Judgment as the clay zombies devour Polnareff. Polnareff believes he is going to die, and that even though they are clones, it is a small relief he got to see Sherry and Avdol once more. Eventually, from the pain, Polnareff begins to see double of Avdol when suddenly one Avdol crushes the hand of the clone. Polnareff and Cameo are taken aback as the real-life Avdol appears. Avdol scolds Polnareff for still holding on to his sister and summons Magician's Red to effortlessly destroy his copy. Cameo collects himself and tosses the body of Sherry at the two. Magician's Red breaks it apart and the top half lands on top of Polnareff. Polnareff, finally willing to let go, stabs the clone of his sister with Silver Chariot's sword, and Avdol apologizes for his earlier comment, Polnareff saying that he needs to apologize too. Cameo decides to attack the duo head-on and tosses them into the air. Avdol, no longer worrying about his wound from Jay Guile, goes all out on Judgment, destroying its armor with explosive kicks and choking it with chains of fire. Judgment retreats, and Avdol and Polnareff decide to find the user. Polnareff, stumbling upon a wooden pipe for breathing, decides to mess with Cameo as dropping various objects down it, and Avdol suggests partaking in a classic male bonding exercise of taking a piss together. They piss down the hole together, causing Cameo to erupt from the ground and beg forgiveness before Avdol burns him to a crisp. Eventually, the duo meet up with the rest of the Crusaders, but everyone is unfazed. Kakyoin reveals that they only kept the secret of Avdol's death from Polnareff so that Polnareff would keep his mouth shut about it. Polnareff is offended, as Joseph explains that the other reason Avdol was in secret was to secure a new mode of transportation for the remaining leg of the journey, as a giant submarine which the Crusaders will take straight to Egypt. End of episodes.
Lots of piss happening here.
Yeah, the
We love
classic
that.
male bonding exercise of taking a piss together.
I'll never forget when I first watched those episodes and that happened, and just I was in the college land, and my roommate was just vibing, watching something, and I just watched that, and I was just started losing it, and he was like, "Bro, are you okay?" And I was like, "Fam, I'm watching JoJo. You got to see this." Like, I lost my mind. I thought it was the funniest thing.
It's probably like one of the weirdest moments of like potty humor in the series, I think.
But it's also the best.
It is I mean, it's got like thematic weight to it, actually, I think.
And it's also just like it's comedy.
Yeah.
Would you like to engage in the ancient ritual of male bonding and take a piss together? Like, it's just a good sentence.
Just for the record, I've never taken a piss with like another man. So I don't know
like
if I'm
most
maybe
men in
I'm
my
missing
family
out.
have.
I don't know, but
I feel like most men in my family have done stuff like that. They're kind of crackheads, honestly. They
right.
live in the woods, so it makes sense. Well, you don't live in the woods. That's probably why. I think it's only people that live in the woods.
All right, should we get into the tarot breakdown real quick?
Yes.
All right.
Most definitely.
So the Judgment card upright represents self-evaluation, awakening, renewal, purpose, reflection, and reckoning, while in reverse, it represents self-doubt, lack of self-awareness, failure to learn lessons, and self-loathing.
See, that doesn't apply to the stand user at all, because we never like meet the stand user, but it applies to Polnareff quite a bit.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely like reckoning for Polnareff's mistakes, like
Not to
literally
mention self-loathing.
Yeah, his self-loathing and his, as Avdol points out, his failure to learn lessons, like just to let go of Sherry's death, and that he needs to sort of live beyond it. Which, you know, happens in this fight. But at the start, he's certainly like that. All right.
Yeah, that fits pretty well.
So
we're going to be elaborating on that for the entire episode.
Yeah. We've got a lot to talk about. There's a lot that happens in this episode. So I guess I want to just start with I feel like whenever we do like really big plot important episodes like this, we always should start with like the big stuff. So why don't we talk about the return of Avdol to the story? I think Avdol really serves more of a purpose in terms of Polnareff's arc, but there's clearly an intention with bringing him back that like he's going to be a sort of a different character now. Like he's much wackier. Like when they're taking the piss together, Polnareff is like, laughing. You know, are you sure?
Are you good?
Are you sure Whole Horse's like bullet didn't cause you to have brain damage? You know, it's like, and he's just maniacally laughing. Avdol is despite like how plot important it is that Avdol is back, it's really like not super consequential, if that makes sense. But I just figured we should talk about it anyway.
Let's not even mention that after learning a couple of things, apparently our king Araki heard like that his fans, Avdol was not a fan favorite at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So that whole point in making him crazier was more just to make him more interesting for the fans. He's like, how about I make him a little wacky?
Yeah.
But then he just thought like, oh, well, if I make him wacky and, just like have it be like that, then it's not going to make any sense. So how about I just make him wacky, but also Polnareff notices? And he's like, what are you doing?
It's really weird. I can sort of see where people are getting at, where Avdol and Kakyoin are very similar in that, like, they're the most straight-laced of the group. But at the same time, making Avdol a goofier character, kind of makes him more similar to Polnareff and Joseph. So, I mean, I don't know what I would have necessarily done with Avdol, but it's an interesting choice to say the least.
I mean, I would almost say that Avdol did change, but I feel like Araki was able to do that pretty well by just making him. He didn't make him into like a different person. He just made him more of himself, just louder.
Yeah.
Like, he was already shown to be like at least kind of silly before, and his way of being silly was just exemplified a bit. Like, they didn't change how he was; they just made more of it.
Mm-hmm. Accentuated him.
Yes, which it makes it feel, at least in terms of the character, it doesn't feel too off, which is pretty lit.
No, I mean, it definitely feels natural for this universe and characters and things like that. I mean, there are definitely loads of examples of more serious characters acting goofy, all throughout the series.
Oh yes, many of them. Everyone has, each and every character in JoJo has like one moment where they're just off the wall. Actually, Jonathan doesn't, I don't think.
Yeah.
Jonathan doesn't go off the wall for a second. He's just like, yes, I am a good boy. I am large and strong, and I'm going to punch this guy. And I'm not very silly because I'm too stupid. Kind of dumb, we're not going to lie.
He's got a good heart, which is what matters.
Yes, that's all that matters.
He's got
with all these like big plot episodes, I never know like how to start. It's like I always have like, for some reason, on like when I have a galaxy brain idea, I'm always like, okay, now where do I start? How do I build up to this?
I mean, I would say
have
like
a way to start.
We should, yeah, just either just go for it or like
we'll go bouncy as we usually do.
Yeah.
All right, so I feel like the most important thing to start off was sort of how the episode started off, is that it definitely reaffirms that Polnareff feels as if he's responsible for Avdol's death, and it is something that he accepts and does not want to be forgiven for. He doesn't believe he deserves to be forgiven for it. So that's an important thing to reestablish right off the bat. That sort of is the base of the entire 2 episodes.
Definitely.
And it's also the base of most of Polnareff's character arc.
Mm-hmm.
We love a good character analysis. I'm sort of just going to try to go in order with my notes. Because that's just, I took them in order of the episodes. Interrupt me when you feel like it.
Okay.
When given another tiny little thing that I noticed, like after that, so you got this dude who shows up. He's like, yes, I am a genie. I will grant you wishes just for fun. And I just found it funny that when given the opportunity to be granted a wish, he's immediately distrustful and aggressive towards the genie. And he's like, when given treasure, he literally just like, his first thought is, are you mocking me? It's just like, when you think about it, it's like, wow, this guy has had so much trauma in the past like months.
I mean, I think
throughout his whole life, and it's just like it's interesting to see that it's just like the minute he is given an opportunity, a good opportunity, he's immediately distrustful. Like, this can't be real.
And I think especially it speaks to just how torn up Polnareff is about like where his life is right now, where I mean, he's distrustful, which I think that's like the smart play. That's, you know, I mean, like, considering that this is a world like filled with, much the same folklore and mythology that we have in our world, like it's natural that he would be like distrustful of someone claiming to be a genie. But what I think sort of shows like just how emotionally burnt Polnareff is the fact that he actually does sort of succumb to Cameo's, posturing that Cameo is able to convince Polnareff like, hey, you can have your sister back and you can have Avdol back. Like Polnareff is just like at his weakest point emotionally.
My man's not having a good time.
He certainly
These
is
two
not.
episodes, it's just like Polnareff getting traumatized more than he already was.
Mm-hmm.
And just having an emotional meltdown, which we stand.
Hey, like AC/DC says, sometimes you just gotta like have a good cry,
Sometimes you need to sob for a minute, and then you're fine. It just needs to happen. Everyone needs a good cry every once in a while.
It's true.
I'm just gonna bring up a couple like really subtle, well, not really subtle, but kind of subtle character moments that I enjoyed that I either didn't notice before or like just didn't care about much before. Another random thing that I just want to get into before the big one is that I just had this random thought that he doesn't seem as shallow as we thought he was, but he's just as much of a dumbass as we thought he was.
Mm-hmm.
I found it interesting when I've mentioned this, they always try to establish a character in JoJo by how they interact with random women. And I found it interesting how Polnareff asked for a girlfriend who was cute, but more importantly, someone he gets along with and loves and who loves him. I was like, yes, my man seems to be shallow sometimes, but I guess he's not, well, he's still probably a little bit shallow, not gonna lie, but maybe a little less so than everyone thought.
I mean,
Maybe
I think
that has to do with a little bit of character growth that I should have brought this up later because it would have made more sense in terms with my points.
I mean, I think the fact that Polnareff thinks about having these sort of selfish, what we might call selfish wishes, but then sort of backtracks, I think is sort of like that's like a very clear picture of who Polnareff is as a person, I think. I mean, he has a predisposition to, maybe being a little bit greedy and maybe being a little bit, I don't know if like lustful is the correct word, but just like,
It might be.
He maybe being a little bit like, wanting a girlfriend. But then like he ultimately is like, no, my wish needs to be something like holistically positive, which is sort of ironic if you think about it, because you consider the fact that like what Polnareff considers to be like a sort of objectively good wish, that being bringing back his sister and bringing back Avdol, is sort of not. I mean, as Avdol, the real Avdol, reminds him, it's that he needs to just accept that Sherry is dead and that no amount of revenge or no amount of, magical wishes is gonna bring her back. Like, so even like Polnareff's, sense of what is an objectively good, or I mean, I don't really like that phrase, but for the point I'm trying to convey, but I mean, it's the best one that I can come up with. Like even Polnareff's sense of like a quote unquote objective good is warped by the fact that he still cannot let go of Sherry's death, and that he still blames himself for Avdol's death.
It's a very good moment when he like that they have a very specific moment in these episodes where he finally realizes, he finally accepts Sherry's death. And it was before that, it's interesting because Cameo literally tells him that he always hopes in the back of his mind that the ones he lost will appear the next day as if nothing happened. And,
Right.
As you said in these episodes, he finally, after, Avdol yet again says that he needs to accept it when fighting the fake Sherry, he realizes that that was not his sister. She's made of dirt. His sister was dead and not coming back. And he defeated the fake Sherry, just straight up saying, "You're not real, you're nothing but dirt." And then a lot of emphasis was put on that one moment when he just stabbed the fake Sherry. And he was very calm, but also very sad.
Definitely. And I think what sort of adds to that is that it's not like Silver Chariot, the full stand that stabbed Sherry. It's like Polnareff's arm is like Silver Chariot's arm. So it's like Polnareff is the one doing it more so than Silver Chariot.
Oh, I didn't notice that. I like that. That's good right there. All right, so my main point, I feel like the one that I was like, yes, I'm having a good time thinking right now, and I wrote 3 paragraphs, had to do with what you brought up earlier, the concept of selfishness. Oh gosh, Ayn Rand would hate me for this.
Dropkick Ayn Rand.
Dropkick Ayn Rand.
We're going to play BioShock, and it's going to be great because
I'm going to go on an Ayn rant.
A massive Ayn Rand dropkick.
Yep. I'm about to drop kick Ayn Rand right now. So let's see where to start. I feel like I should go in order. I feel like an interesting part that I thought of especially was that the stand user, whatever his name is, I forgot what it was. There was Cameo, and did the user have the name, or was that the user's name was Cameo, right? Or
yeah, the user is Cameo,
yes.
The stand is Judgment.
Judgment, yes. I forgot that the tarot thing was a thing for a second. It just slipped my brain for about half a second. He claims that he doesn't actually grant the wishes, sort of. He just draws the wishes out and allows the person to grant it themselves based on how they think the outcome will be. And this is very interesting based on how his wishes ended up. Because based on this, Polnareff imagines that Avdol will not forgive him for being so reckless and uncaring in the moment when he was like, yes, I was never in this for anyone else but myself. I'm just here to avenge my sister. He thinks that Avdol would be angry with him, as reflected in the fake Avdol. And he also thinks that Sherry would be mad at him for all they brought up the thing with the fish when she fed his fish to a cat and he got mad. Even the little moments, deep down he's kind of terrified that he wanted them back, but at the same time he's regretful. He blames himself in a way for all the bad things that happened, especially with Avdol. And he sees Avdol coming back, trying to kill him. Both of them are trying to kill him. And he sort of accepts it. He's like, well, maybe this is how it should be. Maybe I should die because of this, because I caused all of these problems. So I'm just getting what I deserve, I guess. And I thought of the phrase, get what you deserve. That's kind of interesting. Cough. And it's interesting because, where is it? It's, all right, I lost my place.
Well, I think what's interesting is that, I mean, I don't know if this is necessarily where you were going with it, but and I want to return to a point about Cherry later, but for now, it's that specifically that Polnareff feels that this is what he deserves. It's not that, I mean, we literally see Joseph tell Polnareff that Avdol's death is not his fault. And we know, definitively that Sherry's death is not Polnareff's fault. I mean, he wasn't even, near her when she got killed. But yet he still sort of blames himself. it plays into his self-loathing, and I think there's a lot of sort of stuff that compounds to that. I mean, I think he sort of has a self-loathing because he was tricked by Dio and he has the flesh bud, because he failed to save Avdol, because he failed to save his sister. I mean, even where his arc is in the first half, where he's so focused on killing Jay Guile, um, like that, he still feels responsible, even though he got his revenge. And he Polnareff is essentially stuck in this just, continuous streak of self-loathing, even though really from an outsider's perspective, he's totally innocent of all the things that he claims to have done wrong.
Valid, but I realized that was not where I was going, but
Okay.
It was an important thing. It was an important thing to bring up that I totally forgot about for some reason. Everyone else is like, bro, you literally didn't, you had no control over this. And he was like, but I did, because I was a butt munch. I have a really good comparison here, something that I just thought about while watching these episodes. I started rereading the manga for Yona of the Dawn, and I started rewatching the anime just for fun. I've been slowly acquiring the manga, and it happens way in the beginning. What happens with Polnareff reminds me a lot of what happens with another character in Yona, and it has to do with the phrase that I thought of, like, oh, I deserve this, or you deserve this. Normally you think of that as like, there's several ways to think about that phrase. It's like, when I think about it, usually it has to do with if someone works really hard for something and they try to acquire something, they think they deserve it because they put in the work for it, which is, or just something like that. Or someone who's just very entitled, who thinks they deserve something because they've been given everything they ever want in their life. So it almost seems to be, has to do with you desiring something that you think belongs to you, which is inherently sort of a selfish thing, which is what I thought of for like a hot second. And then I realized, wait a minute, it could be interpreted that way, but it could also be interpreted in a different way. So this character in Yona of the Dawn, spoilers from my boy Thomas over here, I'm trying to get more people to watch it or read the manga, because as my friend, the only person I know who loves it, who got me into it, as she once said, the fandom is so small that it consists of 6 people and a shoelace. I just really love that. I just really thought what she said was funny, so I had to include it in here. And the incident reminds me a lot of what happened with the character Taejun, I think that's how you pronounce it, who tried to capture Yona as she was escaping, but in all the chaos, she fell off a cliff. He only realizes in retrospect that he was being careless and becomes deeply depressed, blaming himself for what happens, and he begs the king to be punished for it because, he didn't directly cause her to fall off a cliff, but he feels as if he did cause it. He didn't throw her off, but he just wasn't a fan of that.
Right.
And he feels as if he deserves punishment and cannot live until he's gotten what he feels like he deserved. Like, he can't move on. He literally just, it's a very interesting moment in the manga and in the anime where he literally begs the king to be punished for it because he thinks he killed her. And that goes into me talking about the, getting what you deserve. Both Polnareff and Taejun were really like selfish characters. I mean, Taejun was literally like the prince of this tribe, and he was kind of an asshole in the beginning and nobody liked him. But, and Polnareff was a villain at first for like a hot second. And both of them have been like pretty selfish at times about things. Like, both of them have been shown to only really been caring about themselves until this one moment where they accidentally kind of caused someone's death, but not really. In Taejun's like case, he more so contributed to it because he did sort of corner them on a cliff. So like,
Right.
But it's interesting because I was like, oh well, both of them were kind of selfish. They thought they needed to get what they deserved, which is sort of a selfish thing, like self-loathing, you know? It's like you think that being punished for something will forgive you in the long run. You believe that, you know, like a punishment or jail sentence, whatever, will excuse you from the pain, but it won't, because, you know, either way, you feel guilty and you're going to have to live with that guilt for the rest of your life. Yeah.
And I think that ties really nicely into the point that I was going to make about Sherry, where like one thing that sort of specifically separates the Sherry clone or zombie or whatever from the Avdol one is that like Sherry specifically says that she needs to eat Polnareff or eat his flesh because like she's not fully human. Which, you know, of course is a lie. But
he is dirt.
Right. Because Judgment's powers are that like it looks into a person's heart in order to make the dirt creations, is that Polnareff feels like a psychological need to sacrifice himself for Sherry, that he needs to, you know, emotionally or physically give something up for her. Even though, again, I mean, he's, you know, he doesn't have to do that. I mean, Jay Guile is the one who's solely responsible for Sherry's death. I mean, there's nothing that Polnareff could have done about it. So again, I think this sort of plays into this self-loathing idea that you brought up, and I think it also sort of plays into the great toxic masculinity theory, in that
we love that
Polnareff, you know, like Polnareff feels as though like he can't be emotionally vulnerable. So in order to sort of compensate for that feeling, he has to literally sacrifice a part of him, of his physical self, in order to like feel vindicated or feel, you know, in order for what he's feeling to like be genuine to himself.
That's a good way to put it. I enjoy that. It sort of transitions a little bit into the second half of my big point. Where is it? But yeah, it definitely has that vibe where he's like, it's hard to, you know, especially when you have to sacrifice something and he feels the need to sacrifice something physical. It's like, what can you actually sacrifice? Like, not to go all Full Metal Alchemist on here, but what could equal the value of a human life?
What could equal the value of a human soul?
So, not to go all Full Metal Alchemist again for like the 10th, 15th time on this podcast, but like, goddamn.
It's really good.
Yes. I'm wearing my Full Metal Alchemist shirt today. Oh my god, how about that? The second half of my point, okay, is we both saw, well, we saw Polnareff and the other character Taejun doing pretty selfish things in the beginning. I mean, Taejun was like a full-on incel for like a hot minute. He was like, yes, I need to marry the princess because like my dad is kind of mean and he just wants the throne, so I'm doing this for him. So I'm just gonna like harass this girl. Let's see. And he was only, when he tried to chase down Yona, he knew that like she was like a fugitive at that point, and he was only doing it for the king's approval of him. And same with Polnareff doing, you know, he said at one point that he joined the squad only to get revenge for his sister and, you know, do all that. And he was gonna, you know, and he just full on left, and that's what caused all of his shenanigans. But I noticed something in both of them, that after those incidents, they seemed to let go of those desires specifically, because they both realized that their desires for what their respective things led to people actually dying, and that it definitely wasn't worth it. spoiler alert, both of them end up doing great things later on, with Polnareff sacrificing himself for Iggy, only for Iggy to pull an Uno reverse card on him, no you, and Taejun literally dedicating himself to help a starving village, just happily working himself to the bone to help others. And like it's I just found it like the interesting comparison between those two that sort of went through like a very similar arc. Or like, oh no, I accidentally killed someone and I'm kind of a selfish bastard. Oh no, I guess I have to like make up for it somehow. Please punish me. And they are both refused punishment by, you know, the universe just decides not to punish Polnareff. Well, maybe it kind of does, but like not in the way
in
that
an
he was
indirect
hoping.
sort of way.
In an indirect way. And then Taejun, like the king, literally just refuses to punish him. But both of them sort of make up for it in a different way by doing good things later on. Like, I think they both realize that the way to earn back their honor, I guess, is not to sacrifice something to them, but to make up for it by doing good.
Yes.
That is my conclusion right there.
No, I would say that's totally it. And I feel like it fits really well in with Polnareff's general aesthetic, where, you know, he's sort of associated with like knights a lot. And, you know, knighthood, as we've talked about in the past, has a big focus on honor and like this concept of chivalry and things like that.
I must capture the avatar to restore my honor.
Honor, exactly. And so this is like Polnareff's like ultimate chivalry is not so much like chivalry is all about like, you know, doing good for others. And like that's like what, you know, honor in terms of being a knight is about. And that's what Polnareff is doing by agreeing to, you know, go fight Dio with the rest of the Crusaders, compared to him joining the Crusaders initially, where his goal is selfish. He wants to fight Jay Guile, and then in these episodes, he wants to sort of get an undo button on what he perceives to be his mistakes. And then at the end, you know, sort of, I think, symbolized by him stabbing the clone of Sherry with Silver Chariot sword, is that he has fully embraced the knight's chivalry and is now a truly selfless hero.
They heroes. He a hero. Our boy is a hero. A good lad.
He is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dang, that was like really solid.
we love it when things are solid.
So do you have more to talk about, or should we move on to silly stuff?
I think I have more.
All right, let's hear it.
Do I have more? Where is it?
Let's find out.
Oh yeah. Interesting enough, before when my boy Polnareff is like, oh no, Avdol will not forgive me, but he straight up does. He's like, bro, do you like not remember who I am? I'm like the wisdom person in the group. Like, I'll forgive you, my man. I saw you changed, all right? And he was like, oh, nice. And it was interesting, you know, Avdol immediately just apologized to Polnareff and, you know, said he was wrong. He's like, oh, you did change for the better, but my boy doesn't accept it. And he's still adamant that he didn't change and didn't deserve forgiveness. And then he apologizes to Avdol, now aware of his recklessness and selfishness and how it hurts others. But in that sense, when he's like aware of it, he just proved Avdol right, but being like, bro, you did change. You literally just you just proved to me that you did right there. Stop being mean to yourself.
Yeah. I mean, I do think that Polnareff knows that he changed. It's just that, like you said, like what causes him to apologize is his selfish, you know, nature and his attitude from before.
His desire for redemption.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, not to mention there's like several small moments that show his character development. Like you see back in the good old Emperor and the Hangman episodes, where Avdol tells him to chillax, broski. We should do this the smart way and like not just jump into it without a plan. And that's where the whole problem came from at the beginning. But then you got when Cameo, escaped because Avdol pulled a complete badass moment on him. Polnareff just like calls Cameo a bastard for running away and loudly chases him, and Avdol just shushes him and motions him to come over, and Polnareff just does not question it. He obeys him without question, because it really does show that he grew a lot since then, because him from a month ago wouldn't have done that, as was proven by the Emperor and the Hangman episode being the cause of the problem altogether. So it was just like a very tiny moment that was like, yes, he is now like completely aware of himself. He's still the same person because he was about to like go off and be reckless, but Avdol was like, bro, chill. And he's like, okay, I'll chill.
Yeah, the fact that he's actually willing to sort of defer to his friend is it's a very subtle marker. I like that idea.
It also shows how he grew a little bit of selflessness by not feeling the need to like argue with him about it. It's just like, oh yeah, that's probably a better idea. I don't need to go on the defensive all the time about my actions. I will simply accept that he is right sometimes, and to not get weird about it, which is always a good time.
Yeah, it's him learning humility, which I think is a super important moment in his arc.
Good stuff. And I have one more thing that I haven't talked much about until well, wait, that was the wrong word. I haven't talked much about since the ending of part 2, when we talked about the big Lisa shenanigans. Interesting. Something that I could not just like not notice. Little critique here. I was like, okay, Sherry came back from the dead. She's not wearing any clothes.
Yeah,
Avdol came back from the dead. He's fully clothed. And I'm like, bruh.
I'm glad you brought that up, because
what's the deal with that, my man?
I mean,
either both of them are naked or they're both fully clothed. Pick one.
I don't think that this necessarily, because I was thinking about this on my rewatch.
I was trying to think of how it could have been like, a thing, like what would be the reason for it, and I couldn't think of a good reason for him to do that.
Right. So the one thing I thought of, which I don't even know if it's like necessarily a good idea, but it's just the one that I came up with that I think maybe makes the most sense, is that like Cameo's powers are that he looks into Polnareff's heart and like creates that person. So because Sherry is just kind of this, like all the memories we see of Sherry are positive. Even the fact that like, even when Sherry brings up the whole, giving the fish to the cat thing, like we don't see that from Polnareff's perspective. But what we do see from Polnareff's perspective are, them as kids, and he gives her an umbrella, and like all these like very sort of saccharine moments. And so because she's naked, that is sort of like Polnareff perceives Sherry as an innocent and as vulnerable because of her innocence, and sort of the fact that she's naked is a reinforcement of how Polnareff perceives her, which is that she's vulnerable. Like if you're naked, that's the most vulnerable a human being can be, and it's just sort of a reinforcement of that idea. Even if that was the intention, I still think it's pretty gratuitous that Sherry is naked but Avdol isn't, and it's just weird, but that's the best explanation I could come up with.
I feel like that's a fair point. However, there are many other ways they could have established that.
Totally.
And that's like the real reason why I'm like, huh, you could have established exactly what you just said. However, you could have done it in a much different way. Like,
Yeah, I'm
if they
not
wanted
trying
to,
to.
if they wanted to convey innocence, they could have like, you know, in a lot of the memories, she was like a little kid. She was only like a grown woman in like one of the memories. They could have just like made her but a kid, or they could have made her older but like dressed more like a kid.
Exactly. Yeah.
Or
I
like
mean,
dressed in that same way, like with the umbrella that he bought her. Like that, I feel like that would be even
yeah, that would be
a
great.
stronger moment.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I'm not trying to justify that scene.
Oh yeah, I know. It's just fun to like, let's see how we can stretch this.
How can I crowbar this idea so that I sound smart?
That's really how it be though. Sometimes you gotta do some crowbarring.
Exactly.
One time I was in my basement here and I was just like existing, and this basement is full of a bunch of random crap, and I just found a crowbar on the floor and I was like, what's that from? Where did that come from? And it was only there for one day and it disappeared the next day. I'm like, okay, the ghost crowbar strikes again.
We're just going to be hanging out, and one day the ghost crowbar appears. It's like, oh,
Just
God.
in the dorm, the crowbar comes back. Oh no. What should we do with this? Perhaps commit a crime.
All
Time
right.
to commit crimes. I think that's all the serious stuff I have.
Yeah, that's all the serious stuff I have. Silly stuff.
There was a hot couple of them.
Yeah, there's a few things.
First of all,
Polnareff Land is a highlight for me.
yes, Polnareff Land is probably, there's like, I think 2 big memes in this episode, and that's Polnareff Land and yes, I am.
Yeah, you have Avdol's English, yes, I am. We already pointed out
Muhammad Avdol, yes, I am.
The whole, you know, male bonding experience, I think is pretty funny.
Would you like to engage in the ancient ritual of male bonding and take a piss together?
I think just the fact that everyone is so like deadpan about Avdol's return and Polnareff's like little freak out session about it is pretty great as well.
My man is mad traumatized. They just let him stay traumatized for that long. It's like they could have told him that it was fine, but like that wouldn't be good for character development.
Yeah, like why didn't they tell him as soon as they got on the island? You know,
it just like caused so much anxiety for him. He like lost his mind thinking about it. I also just love the part where he's like, I want to be a comic book artist. You know, I want to be bigger than Disney and build Polnareff Land. It's like there's Polnareff Land, which is that, but like the build up to it, which was pretty good too.
I think I just have a lot of questions about the whole reason why they don't tell Polnareff that Avdol is alive.
Like, well, it was like Kakyoin did explain. He was like, well, they weren't going to tell me, but then I found out, but you're kind of a loudmouth and we didn't want Dio to know.
Well, I understand that part,
but like it could have been, you know.
Like mostly my question comes from the fact that like, all right, so like one thing that I didn't bring up in the summary is that it's not actually Avdol's father on the island. It's just Avdol in disguise.
Oh yeah, that whole thing, like what was the point of doing that if they were like on the island and supposedly they didn't think there were any stand users there and yet they were still pretending for some reason?
Yeah, exactly. Like that's what I want to know. Like
it was for character development.
Yeah, I mean it's you know, it's not that big a deal in the grand scheme of things, but it's just like, you know,
it's a little thing.
Like why does this happen? Like where's the logic?
Also, hell to you.
Yeah.
That was so dumb.
Hail to you and hell to you is like, and it's written like text language. Like it's like hail, the number 2, and then capital letter U, and it's like.
It's just so dumb. It's just like, it's like, oh yes, I'm gonna be badass and do hell to you. And I was like, well, that's kind of dumb, but like, Avdol does pull a badass moment. He's like, give me 4 wishes. And he lists off his 4 wishes. Like, I just want to cause you pain. And I was like, that's pretty badass, not gonna lie.
Beat the shit out of you 1 through 4.
Yeah. That was a pretty solid badass moment.
Yeah. Oh, one thing that I think is just kind of funny slash weird is like the mascot of Polnareff Land is Silver Chariot. Like you can see Silver Chariot designs on like the rides and stuff like that, and it's
Oh yeah.
like, but like he's the only one who can see Silver Chariot. Like none of the amusement park goers can see him. So like,
Yeah. There's one thing that I have written here that's like kind of serious, but I forgot to. It's small, I think, that I just like didn't. I forgot to bring up. Um, it just made me go, I can't tell if that's that. If I don't know how to feel about that. When Avdol burned that guy at the end, the vibe struck me as not good. I will say that.
oh yeah, I know what you're talking about.
The vibe struck me as not good. It looked way too much like old caricatures. Very old, very racist caricatures.
Yeah, it's.
I noticed that like the first time and I was like,
I think it's probably more of a side effect of
I highly
just
doubt it was intended.
yeah, because it's not like Cameo is black. I don't think.
I highly doubt it was intended, but I just feel like I had to bring it up because it did just whenever I see it, I just feel awkward.
No, it's
Like
weird.
it doesn't it's not right.
Like it kind of reminds me of like as much as I really enjoy the series, like Full Metal Alchemist. There's a scene where they're in a hotel and like the guy who is like the receptionist or whatever at the hotel, like kind of looks a little bit racist. um, I mean, it makes me wonder if it's. I mean, I don't think it's intentional, but it just kind of makes me wonder if it's more of a side effect of the sort of standard anime art style, or
Yeah,
I don't know. But it's good that you brought it up. I think.
they have a character like that in Dragon Ball as well. That it's
Oh,
like,
yeah, Mr. Popo. Yeah.
yeah.
Um,
Where it's like, I have to keep reiterating, I really, based on where it's made and like based on history, I don't think it's intentionally malevolent. It has, I feel like it's just like not understood in some places about the seriousness of that kind of
yeah.
stuff.
I mean, Mr. Popo. You could at least make the argument that he's based on like a character, mythological character.
Yeah.
Whereas, but like other black characters, can't exactly do that as effectively. But
I
yeah,
mean, it's also like, slightly comforting because JoJo is one of like the few animes I've ever seen to ever have like several black characters
yeah. There's
that
black
are
people in the
actual
series.
like that are actually like developed as characters. Like you got Smokey, you got Avdol, you got like I would say Hermes in part 6.
Well, I,
Um
I was gonna suggest Poca Loco in Steel
oh
Ball
wait.
Run as well.
Oh, I haven't gotten there yet.
Oh yeah, well,
I don't know much about
Poca
Steel Ball
Loco's a
Run.
great character.
And Poochie is sort of like ambiguous, but
Yeah, I don't know. We don't want to get into a Poochie's race discussion because, like, Jesus Christ.
we're not there yet. We're not there yet.
um, yeah. So, do we have any other silly stuff to talk about, or
One more.
yeah, go for it.
We all live in a yellow submarine. Yellow submarine. Yellow submarine.
I mean, Araki was probably on drugs when he was like writing most parts of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, right? Like, probably.
But like they had a yellow submarine at the end of it. An actual yellow submarine.
I'm trying to
I was like,
remember if there's any stands
that
specifically.
was
Oh, there's White Album, which is a
there's
Beatles
several
reference.
Beatles stands, I think.
Yeah, there's a few.
And then you got the yellow submarine, which is definitely a reference to the Beatles. Araki wouldn't just make the submarine yellow. He likes classic rock too much
It's sure.
for that to be a coincidence.
The yellow submarine should have been called the Yoko Oh No.
That's a Yoko Ono. Oh
Um,
gosh. I remember one time in the good old dorm, we just started listening to a bunch of Yoko Ono music and having the times of our lives.
I this is the last thing I'll say before we wrap up, but I once did this sort of summer like creative writing course at this one college, and they have like a specific like piece of art on campus named after Yoko Ono, and Yoko Ono famously hates it, but they still keep it around. So
Oh boy.
it's pretty funny.
Welp, Ayn Rand is definitely angry at me from the grave.
We'll have to fight the ghost of Ayn Rand next time.
I have to fight Ayn Rand. That's been my whole summer, has been fighting Ayn Rand. That's why I bring her up so often. Because I'm required to read Atlas Shrugged for purposes. So the entire summer has been me fighting Ayn Rand.
Maybe if we ever discuss the BioShock games, we'll rename this podcast I Want to Fight Ayn Rand.
I do want to fight Ayn Rand. I'm going to make a list of people I want to fight.
Just add her to the list.
Most philosophers.
Anyway, if you want to keep up with all the silly, semi-serious stuff that I post about and talk about on the internet, you can follow me at Thomas M. Brickman. I also do another podcast with my buddy Kevin, where we discuss video game news and reviews. You can catch up on the archives on that just by searching post-game content on youtube.com. And if you want to keep up with updates relating to that podcast, you can also follow us at PostGameCon. That's at PostGameCon on Twitter. And Emily, where can people find you on the internet?
Twitter, at Emily Winkles. I exist there.
I exist sometimes.
I exist occasionally.
And if you want to keep up with all the news and hilarious memes that Emily finds or makes, you can keep up with that by following the social medias. It's at iwanttofightar1 on Twitter, and I Want to Fight Araki on Instagram. And with all that said, we'll see you guys next time, where we conclude the Road to Egypt storyline of Stardust Crusaders with episodes 23 and 24. We'll see you guys then.